Oh, good.
Yeah, and I'm turning that on now. Do you guys have your rosters?
Roster?
Not yet.
Okay, all right, and I'm turning that on now. So I'll give you the link in the chat. Rosters?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you the link to the live stream in the chat just to you guys. And so if you want to watch yourself, later or send it, put it on your Facebook page. So as to let everybody know you were actually really doing what you said. Anyway.
Hey, Mom, watch me on TV.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on YouTube. Yeah, so I'm going to give you the link to the and you'll want to have the YouTube off while we're doing this. Otherwise, we'll just get feedback. But anyway.
Are you going to send us the roster as well?
I don't have it.
Okay.
And I don't see it either. It didn't really make any difference. Do you have scoring sheets?
We have the scoring sheets. I do, at least. Yeah.
I saw they'd be electronic, so I didn't do any downloading.
So I assume that the names of the students will come up on the screen. What about their team codes? Will that show up as well?
No, but let's see. I'll ask them to tell us that in the beginning. They're usually names like Fuzzy Badger and SpongeBob. But their names will pop up and it'll be obvious who's with the prosecution and the defense. So Mark, are you in Boulder?
Longmont.
Longmont. Cool.
Long live Longmont.
Is the
What
chief
firm are you with, or what do you do?
Flanders, Ellsberg, Herber, and Dunn. Some mostly civil litigation.
Is the cheese place open yet?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. There's a lot of places still closed here. We've noticed a few restaurants here on Main have just opened back up in the last week.
Good. Yeah, we moved to yellow, so I know that's made a difference. Our firm can be at 50% instead of 25%, which is such a big difference. We're so tiny. 25% was 2 people, so it was pretty tough.
Yeah, it's hard on people. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, at least we're making progress. We seem to be moving forward now a little bit faster. Got a plan.
Yeah, my kids are back in school 2 days a week in high school and middle school up in Louisville. So they're at Monarch Middle and Monarch High. So that's awesome. Yeah.
We love them, but we love them to be with other people and see other things because, too much togetherness is just.
Well, I have a freshman in high school, so she had only been to school 3 days before January all year in high school. And so it was like, how are you supposed to learn how to be a teenager?
They'll be able to roll with punches that they never thought they could before. They'll be creative kids.
Oh, yeah. And they know how to do laundry and dishes and help clean around the house and all that stuff. Make dinners.
When they watch this, they're going to be really happy hearing Mom talk about them. Like,
Are they back in school full time or is it a part-time schedule?
2 days a week.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. But I'll take it. And actually, I like that because I think if you had full, everyone in a high school would be so many people. So with half, they can still spread out. I mean, it's still plenty of kids. So we'll see. They're going to make a decision first week of March about when they'll go back to, you know, full time, but they haven't made a decision or announced anything yet. Yeah, and the online school has worked great. I think they definitely have an easier go of it. I think they have a lot less homework, and I don't think it's as challenging as it would have normally been. But you know,
I've heard some pretty good and bad stories. Some people's kids have had a hard time with online school.
Yeah.
Others have been fine. I don't know. I don't know what the difference is, but apparently it's a mixed bag.
yeah, my kids are really self-driven, so they're like in all A's, and they're just like doing their homework and done by one, and like, okay, did it all. And but that's just the kid, I think. If you're not self-driven, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I have nephews who are almost failing out of school because they have special needs and the school just can't accommodate those over Zoom.
Yeah, it's kind of one or the other. You're either
Yeah.
rocking it or you're not rocking it at all. Yeah.
One of my partners, he's got a son with autism, pretty severe autism, and it's amazing to me. He says he's doing really well. He's excelling with online school. That works well for him. So it's apparently not the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they'll want to continue. I mean, BVSD has an online, permanent online school, but you need the social piece. But yeah, for some kids, it could work really well.
Sure.
My kids don't like it. They're doing academically well, but they kind of hate not
All
being.
right, I'm gonna start admitting our student.
Okay.
Oh, there's Laura.
Laura's not a student. Hi, Laura.
Laura, I thought you were a student.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I am going to drop the rosters into the chat. Your two teams that you'll be seeing, you are going to have Scooter on prosecution and Rolf will be on defense. They are all Muppets this year. So I am sending these. If I can figure out, do you know, Kyle, I don't even know how to link these. Let me figure this out.
Just when you're in the Dropbox, right click them and you should be able to
Okay.
get the
Okay, I need Scooter.
copy Dropbox.
Okay. How do I copy it in, Kyle? It's in there.
Just go into chat and then just right click and paste. Okay. Three. You guys hear me okay? Excellent. So you guys are going to be Pepe prosecution, Gonzo defense. I'm going to drop rosters into the chat.
Kyle, it's not going in.
I'll do it if you can. Just tell them who they're seeing up against. So again, Gonzo.
Okay, I'll have those rosters to you in just a minute. Let me figure this out. I'll be right back.
Defense, and then you
No
guys
problem.
Pepe for prosecution.
Okay, and then pop over here and show me so I can do this right.
Sherry, is that you?
Hi, it's me.
Cool. No worries. So I just drop the chats into the link. Tiago is the host. Tiago, if you can make Sherry the host again, and then share the links with anyone who didn't have. I have to run. Thank you, guys. Sure.
Could I ask the participants to make sure your names are correct? So that we can be
Is
accurate
that how
with
they come
who
up?
you
Yeah.
are and what you're doing.
Hold on, let me make sure I'm doing this right before you go. Yeah, it did a weird
Yeah,
open
copy
thing.
link.
Yeah, it just opened it before.
Great, Laura, it's successful.
Okay. So your links are in there. And again, Scooter is on prosecution. Rolf is on defense. Okay.
Let me ask everyone to look at everyone. Is there anybody missing from the prosecution team? Take your head no or yes.
No, Your Honor.
And for the defense, is your whole team here?
Yes, Your Honor.
Perfect. Well, welcome to our wonderful class and our wonderful courtroom for this afternoon. The first task I have is to make sure that you all look around and make sure you have no conflicts. And I need an affirmation that none of the judges know any of the counselors, and there are no conflicts. So Deirdre, do you see any conflicts?
No, Your Honor.
And Carolyn?
No, Your Honor, I don't.
All right, I'm so happy to be able to certify that we are a conflict-free zone for this afternoon. Is the prosecution ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Perfect. I just want to remind everybody that compliance with time is really important. Even though you may have more to say, we have to cut you off at your time. So just be aware of that. No. All right, well, it's time to swear you in. How's that? Team members, raise your right hands. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you're about to give will faithfully and fully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? Yes? Okay. Now, witnesses. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Please signal by yes. Perfect. Do we have any gallery members? Teachers, attorney coaches? Doesn't look like that. And then scoring panelists, please raise your right hand. It'll be Mark, Carolyn, and Deirdre. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Perfect. Counsel for the prosecution, will you be leading this discussion, Ms. Hirsch?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you have any preliminary matters for me to consider?
Yes, Your Honor. But first, may I introduce myself and co-counsel?
Of course.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Brianna Hirsch, and today I will be delivering the opening statement on behalf of the prosecution, conducting the direct examination of Kyle Cusack and the cross-examination of Taylor Perkins.
Good afternoon. My name is Jasper Bloom. I will be conducting the direct examination for Alex Cifuentes and the cross-examination of Professor Blake Van Owen.
Good afternoon. My name is Annaluna Grant. I will be conducting the direct examination of Detective Jordan Markowitz, the cross-examination of Avery Becker, and delivering the closing argument on behalf of the prosecution. May our witnesses now introduce themselves?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is George Bradley, and I am Detective Jordan Markowitz.
Good afternoon.
Sorry. Good afternoon. My name is Ellie Musfell, and I am Kyle Kuzak.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Tristan Med, and I am Alex Cifuentes.
Good afternoon, Tristan. Counsel for the defense. Do you have any preliminary matters for me to consider?
Your Honor, the prosecution does have a few preliminary matters.
I'm sorry, did I misspeak? Counsel for the defense, do you have any preliminary matters such as introducing your team?
Your Honor, our main lawyer who was going to handle the preliminary matters just got kicked out of the meet. Maybe we take a second to let her come back.
She got kicked out of the Zoom?
She did. She will come back shortly.
Okay. Well, the remaining counsel, would you like to introduce yourselves while we wait?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Hannah Burns, and I will be delivering the opening statement, the direct examination of Professor Blake Van Owen, and the cross-examination of Kyle Kuzak.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Brooke Getzoff, and today I will be directing Taylor Perkins, crossing Detective Markowitz, and delivering the closing statement.
All right, Lydia.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Lydia Marquis, and I will be directing Avery Becker, crossing Alex Cifuentes, and delivering the preliminary matters.
Great. Would the witnesses please introduce themselves?
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Haley Bonowitz, and I will be portraying Taylor Perkins.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Isabella Nelson, and I will be portraying Blake Van Owen.
Thank you, ma'am. And another witness? Any other witnesses?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Jessica Bush, and I will be portraying Avery Becker.
Perfect. And I want to thank our timer, Felix, the most important job today. Thank you for doing that very important technical job for us. Counsel for the prosecution, do you have any evidentiary or matter stipulations or anything that I should consider?
Yes, Your Honor. First, pursuant to Mock Trial Rule 511, in light of our virtual format, we request permission to remain seated during openings, directs, crosses, and closes, and objections. We mean no disrespect and would absolutely stand if we were in the courtroom. However, since we are virtual, we feel it would be distracting in this case.
I couldn't agree more, Ms. Hirsch, and being seated, and if you can be close to your microphone, it's very, very helpful. So please relax, remain seated, and you don't need to ask to approach a witness or anything like that because we're here together. All right, any other preliminary matters, Ms. Hirsch?
Yes, Your Honor. When we are entering exhibits, may we constructively screen share them with the witness to authenticate the exhibit? And once it's entered, may we then constructively publish the exhibit to the jury?
And when you say constructively, constructively show it, you mean that everybody has a copy and you're going to go through it, or are you going to put it up on the screen?
No, we are going to put it up on the screen, Your Honor.
Okay, that's fine with me. Any objection to that procedure?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Anything further, Ms. Hirsch?
Yes, Your Honor. Pursuant to Mock Trial Rule 203, may we have permission for witnesses to use the Zoom functions to annotate exhibits once they've been entered?
Yes, ma'am. Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, that will proceed by that rule.
And Your Honor, We hope this will not happen, but in the event that someone loses their Wi-Fi connection, maybe contact their teammates to explain what's happening via text. This will be the only time we are not using Zoom communications throughout the trial.
Yes, we must all help each other stay connected during this competition, and that is a good suggestion. Any objections to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Anything further, Ms. Hirsch?
Your Honor, finally, the prosecution would like to resolve any remaining time in our closing argument for rebuttal.
Granted.
The prosecution is ready to proceed.
All right. Does the defense have any preliminary matters they'd like me to hear?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense just has one more housekeeping matter to attend to. We'd like to draw the court's attention to Rule 7.4 of competition, which states that all witnesses shall have all case materials available and in their possession during their testimony, but may only refer to them when prompted by an examining attorney.
That is the rule. And is everybody prepared for that? Okay, everybody agrees with you, Ms. Marquis. So that is exactly how we'll proceed very efficiently. Thank you.
No
All
further
right.
preliminary.
Thank you. Would the prosecution please present their opening statement? And for everybody else, please make sure you're muted and that your camera's off so that they can have the full screen.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, members of the jury, today the evidence will show you that the defendant has gone too far. On March 6th of 2020, the victim, Mackenzie Brackman, was in his house relaxing. He was relaxing before he needed to go to Colorado High School so he could coach a practice for his mock trial team. But Mr. Brackman never did make it to that practice. And as we'll prove to you today, that's because of the defendant, Avery Becker. Now, the defendant, who's a former member of Mr. Brackman's mock trial team, went to Mr. Brackman's house on that same Friday, intent on trashing the place. However, the defendant and Mr. Brackman had certainly never been close, but as you will learn today, it all came to a head on March 6th of 2020. Because on March 6th, the defendant made the decision to break into Mr. Brackman's house, a break-in that went wrong and led to Mr. Brackman's murder. My name is Brianna Hirsch, and I, along with my co-counsel, Jasper Bloom and Annaluna Grant, represent the people of the state of Colorado. This is a case about a feud that has gone too far, about a series of disagreements between a coach and a student that ended in a murder. Today, you will hear the details of those disagreements in court, and you will learn that as the tension built, the defendant's escalating reactions led to Mr. Brackman kicking him off the mock trial team. However, we can't just tell you that it was the defendant who killed Mr. Brackman. As the prosecution in today's case, we must prove that on March 6th of 2020, the defendant broke into Mr. Brackman's house, intending to destroy his personal property, and that while he committed that crime, the defendant caused Mr. Brackman's death. To prove this, we're going to call 3 different witnesses to the stand today. First, you'll hear from Detective Jordan Markowitz, a homicide detective with the Denver Police Department who has 13 years of experience. Detective Markowitz will walk you through the police's investigation, and he'll explain how he used his specialty in serial data analysis to uncover evidence that points straight to the defendant and only to the defendant as the perpetrator in this attack. You'll learn the details of the attack itself when Miss Kyle Cusack takes the stand. Ms. Kuzak is a crime scene reconstruction investigator with 19 years of experience, and she will walk you through what happened at Mr. Brackman's on that fateful Friday, starting with when the defendant arrived on Mr. Brackman's property and ending with Mr. Brackman's death and the defendant's escape. Finally, you'll also hear from Mr. Alex Cifuentes, a longtime teammate of the defendant. Mr. Cifuentes will tell you about the text messages he received from the defendant right before the attack, detailing his plan to go and trash Mr. Brackman's house. Now, the defense will try and convince you that that someone else committed this crime, but they'll have nothing except for speculation to back this up. They'll call the defendant to the stand, who will attempt to disprove Detective Markowitz's case. But listen closely, and you'll hear the defendant admit that despite that she supposedly lost her phone the day before the murder, the very phone she texted Mr. Cifuentes on. Taylor Perkins, the defendant's best friend, will back up that story, but listen closely and you'll also hear her admit that despite the fact that the defendant considered her phone to be like a third kidney, she still didn't notice it was missing until the next day. Finally, you'll hear from Professor Blake Van Owen, a former police detective who is supposedly an expert in police procedure. However, you'll learn that he only spent 9 months on the police force before he left due to his own misconduct. Your Honor, by the end of this trial, we will have
I'm sorry, time is run.
Thank you.
Counsel for the defense, opening statements, please.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
You can't fit the wrong puzzle piece into the puzzle, no matter how hard you try. Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Today, you will hear the story of the murder of Mackenzie Brackman, the mock trial coach at Colorado High School, found dead in the doorway of his own home, stabbed in the back by an unknown intruder. You can't fit the wrong puzzle piece into the puzzle, no matter how hard you try. The prosecution will try to tell you that the individual responsible for the murder of Mackenzie Brackman was one of his very own students, Miss Avery Becker. Miss Becker was a dedicated member of the mock trial team. She was very talented, winning many awards at competitions. It is true that Miss Becker and Mr. Brackman had their occasional disagreements, and this is why the prosecution alleges that Avery Becker broke into Mackenzie Brackman's home and killed him. However, as you will see today, the investigation done by the prosecution was rushed and incomplete and failed to explore many important aspects of the case that just differed from their approach. Despite the lack of evidence, the prosecution decided on one suspect, a high school student with no motive and a clear alibi. In doing so, the prosecution tried to force the wrong puzzle piece into the puzzle without noticing the seemingly more correct pieces, such as one Blair Rollins, former Colorado high school student and the daughter of a man sentenced to prison after Mr. Brackman failed to prove his innocence. In proving our case today, we will call 3 witnesses to the stand. First, you will hear from Taylor Perkins, Avery Becker's best friend. As Miss Becker's best friend, Miss Perkins will tell you that although some days she did slack off, Miss Becker always came through and was a crucial member of the team. Most importantly, Miss Perkins will tell you that she was with Miss Becker on the day of the murder. Miss Perkins will tell you that the day before the murder, Miss Becker lost her phone, and that on the day of the murder, Miss Perkins and Miss Becker spent the entire day looking for the phone. Next, you will hear from Professor Blake Van Owen. Professor Blake Van Owen conducted her own partial investigation alongside the investigations done by Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak. Professor Blake Van Owen will tell you that the investigations done by Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak were rushed and not soundproof, and that their examinations of the manner of the stabbing, the scuff marks, and the cell phone tower records were not thorough and did not match the correct theory of investigation. Professor Blake Van Owen will tell you that there is no physical evidence or DNA tying Avery Becker to the scene of the crime. Lastly, you will hear from the defendant herself, Miss Avery Becker. Miss Becker will tell you in her own words about her disagreements with her mock trial coach. Miss Becker will also tell you that the day before the murder, she lost her phone, and that the last time she saw her phone was at the Fry Shack. Miss Becker will tell you that most of the mock trial students were at the Fry Shack that day, including Alex Cifuentes, a friend of Blair Rollins. The prosecution holds the burden of proof in today's case, meaning that it is their job to prove to you that Avery Becker broke into Mackenzie Brackman's home and killed him beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution is not able to meet this burden. They have no physical evidence or DNA tying the defendant, Avery Becker, to the scene of the crime and rush to tie up loose ends without exhausting all other possibilities. Not only this, but the prosecution failed to investigate Blair Rollins, a suspect with much more of a motive and one that was missing from school on the day of the murder. She cannot be found even now. At the end of this trial, you will be asked to determine a verdict. We ask that you consider the lack of physical evidence or DNA tying Avery Becker, the defendant, to the crime, and that you look at the rush at which the prosecution performed their investigation. We ask that you look at how difficult it was for the prosecution to put their puzzle together, and that you look at all of the pieces of the case, not just the ones that don't fit. Finally, we ask that you find Avery Becker not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Would the prosecution like to call the first witness?
Yes, Your Honor, the prosecution calls Detective Jordan Markowitz to the stand.
I remind Mr. Markowitz that you're under oath. Please proceed with your examination.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Detective Jordan Markowitz.
What is your connection to this case, Detective Markowitz?
I was the first investigator on the scene after police officers had cleared it.
I would now like to talk a bit about your background and qualifications. Where are you currently employed?
The Denver Police Department.
For how long have you been working with the Denver Police Department?
About 13 years.
For how long have you been operating as a police detective within these 13 years?
Roughly 7.
Within your career as a homicide detective, do you have any other experience?
Yes, I have a specialization in cellular data analysis.
Have you received any certification for this?
Yes, I have a cellular technology and forensic data recovery certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement.
What did this training equip you with?
All knowledge related to cell phones. I know how to gather and interpret the data that can be obtained from cell phones and cell tower records, as well as how to apply this information to cases.
Has this been useful in your career thus far?
Absolutely. I've downloaded the contents of literally hundreds of cell phones and have used this data in 50 plus cases.
Your Honor, at this time, I now move to enter Detective Markowitz as an expert in crime scene investigation with a specialty in cellular data analysis under Rule 702.
Any objection, Ms. Getzoff?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Markowitz will be, this expert will be accepted in the fields outlined by counsel as an expert witness to provide opinions to assist the evaluation of the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would now like to talk about why you're here today. Are you here to give an expert opinion today?
Yes, I am.
What is that expert opinion?
On March 6th of 2020, Miss Becker went to the home of Mackenzie Brackman to break in and trash the home. However, upon entering, was unexpectedly encountered by Mr. Brackman, which led to a scuffle in the dining room and ultimately led to Mr. Brackman's death after he was stabbed to death by Becker.
Let's transition to talk about the crime scene investigation that was carried out. Take the jury to the crime scene. What time did you arrive?
I arrived at about 14:20 hours or 2:20 p.m.
And upon first entering Mr. Brackman's home, what did you notice?
Right at the front door, you could see Mr. Brackman's lifeless body laying there with a stab wound in his left shoulder and blood pooled around it.
Did you notice anything else about the body?
Yes, a few feet away, there was also a bloodied knife resting on the floor.
After you noticed this bloody knife, what else caught your attention?
There was also blood drops on the floor and blood spatter on the wall and ceiling.
After you noticed the body, the bloody knife, and the blood spatter, how did you proceed in your investigation?
I immediately began to photograph and document these findings so that our crime scene reconstructionist could immediately view them.
And what did the rest of the home look like?
It was in disarray.
What do you mean by disarray?
In the dining room, there was a plate shattered on the floor and a chair knocked over.
What did these scenes indicate to you?
To me, this meant that there was likely a scuffle between the intruder and Mr. Brackman there.
And after these signs of a scuffle, did you notice anything else in the home?
Yes, through further investigation, I also noticed an open knife drawer and a knife block with a large knife missing from it.
What did you do before you left the scene of the crime?
I gathered the data from Mr. Brackman's personal cell phone, which gave me the ring security footage, which are accurate copies of exhibits 10, 11, 12, and 13.
We'll show those videos to the jury a little bit later, but for now, did you download any other information from Mr. Brackman's phone?
Yes, I also found a tremendous number of texts and emails regarding something called mock trial. It's apparent that Mr. Brackman was a coach of the mock trial team for Colorado High School. After I learned this, I reached out to get the contact info for the rest of the team.
Was this successful?
Yes, it led me to my best lead, Alex Fuentes.
Did you set up an interview with Alex Fuentes after this?
Yes, I did. He informed me of another Colorado mock trial team member, Avery Becker, who had sent texts to him regarding getting back at Mr. Brackman after she had been kicked off of the team for vandalizing Mr. Brackman's car.
What did you do after learning this information from Mr. Fuentes?
Naturally, I tried to set up an interview with Becker. However, I was immediately stopped by her lawyer and was informed that all further communication would have to go through her lawyer. Her lawyer also informed me that she had allegedly lost her cell phone on March 5th.
Let's transition to how you did obtain that data from Miss Becker's phone, excuse me. How were you able to access the phone's records in the first place?
Eventually, I had to get a court order.
And what pieces of evidence did you rely on for this portion of the investigation?
Cell tower records, or technically speaking, call detail records, which I just like to refer to as CDRs.
And can you please explain to the jury what exactly call detail records are?
Sure. So CDRs are a record created and kept by a cell tower whenever a call or text message is sent or received. It also records the numbers involved, if it was a call, how long it lasted, and the date and time of communication.
Does the record identify anything else when this happens?
Yes, and this is actually the critical part. So the record also identifies which cell tower was being communicated with, which allows us to accurately pinpoint the location of a cell phone when it's in use.
How did you use the call detail records in this specific investigation?
In this investigation, we had another cell phone communicating with Avery Becker's phone as it was traveling along.
And how do cell phones connect to these cell towers exactly?
Usually there's a very complicated algorithm that connects a cell phone with the best possible cell tower as a receiver. However, in my experience, a cell phone will almost always connect to the cell tower that it's closest to.
And were you able to confirm who this phone belonged to that was contacting Miss Becker's phone during this time?
Yes, it was yet another mock trial team member, Taylor Perkins.
What did Miss Perkins' calls and texts indicate to you?
They were all quite short or not responded to, which means that Miss Becker's phone was not being checked during this time.
Did you find anything else on Miss Becker's phone?
Unfortunately, no. All activity on her phone ceased after 1320 hours on March 6th.
And how did you compile the data gathered from Miss Becker's phone?
Using the data I got from the CDRs, I put together a diagram which accurately shows where her cell phone was during this time as it was communicating with cell towers.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that I am constructively showing the witness what has been previously marked as Exhibit 16 for identification purposes. Detective Markowitz, do you recognize Exhibit 16?
Yes, it's the diagram that I created after I compiled all of the data from the CDRs.
Is this a true and accurate copy of Exhibit 16?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I now move to enter Exhibit 16 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 16 will be admitted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Markowitz, how did you use Exhibit 16 to track the location of Miss Becker's phone during this time?
As we could see in the top left corner up here, cell tower 1227-3 was the first cell tower to be in communication with Avery Becker's phone. putting her phone at her residence.
And how did you use the second location to pinpoint the location of Ms. Becker's phone during this time?
Cell tower 1191-1 is the cell tower covering Rock Creek Parkway, which we can see here outlined in the blue dots. And this is the path that is most logical for somebody to travel if they are coming from Becker's residence to Mr. Brackman's residence.
And finally, where was the location of the third cell tower that communicated with Ms. Becker's phone during this time?
Cell tower 1197-1, the third and final cell tower to be communicating with Avery Becker's phone as it traveled along what we assume to be Rock Creek Parkway, is the cell tower located closest to Mr. Brackman's home, placing Avery Becker's cell phone at his residence during this time.
So with respect to the date and time, how were you able to use the call detail records to craft an accurate timeline of the events leading up to the homicide?
The first signals were picked up at 12:47 to 12:55, indicating that Ms. Becker was at her home from the 12:47 to 12:55. And then from 12:55 to 13:05, her phone signal was picked up along Rock Creek Parkway as it was traveling along. And then finally at 13:05 to 13:17, her phone signal was picked up at Mr. Brackman's residence.
Let's transition to your final thoughts about this case. What is the evidence you relied on today led you to believe?
In my expert opinion, as a detective and using all of the physical evidence gathered, the CDRs and the interview with Alex Cifuentes, it's clear to me that on March 6th of 2020, Avery Becker went to the home of Mr. Brackman with intent to break in and vandalize the home. However, upon entering, unexpectedly encountered Mr. Brackman, which led to a scuffle in the dining room and ultimately led to Mr. Brackman's untimely death as he was stabbed by Avery Becker.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Detective Markowitz.
Good afternoon.
Isn't it true that the first student you talked to was Alex Cifuentes for this case?
That's correct.
And just to be clear, you didn't contact anyone else on the mock trial team?
I attempted to set up an interview with Avery Becker. However, her lawyer immediately stopped me. And no, I didn't end up getting any other interviews with the mock trial team members.
So after talking to Alex Cifuentes, you didn't investigate any further on the case regarding to talking to people. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And just to be clear, you did not interview Avery Becker?
I did not, no.
Instead, you simply relied on one testimony from one mock trial student?
Yes, that's where the evidence led me.
Okay, and did you compare Alex Cifuentes' story with any other students that were in contact with Mr. Brackman?
The CDRs proved what I had believed, so no, I did not.
Okay, and did you ever verify the accuracy on Alex Cifuentes' statements?
What happened with the text is simply standard police work, so no, I did not.
Moving to the evidence the student had for you, Alex Cifuentes had screenshots of a text exchange with Avery Becker, is that correct?
Yes.
And you scheduled this interview with Alex Cifuentes to namely discuss these text messages?
Yes.
But when Alex Cifuentes came down, they left their phone at home, didn't they?
I imagine he was nervous, so I can't really blame him. However, yes, he unfortunately did leave his phone at home.
And because Alex left their phone at home, they emailed you screenshots, is that correct?
Yes.
And you did not ask to meet again with Alex Cifuentes with the phone?
That's correct, yes.
So you're telling me that you trusted a clear piece of evidence that shows Avery Becker is a suspect from just being emailed screenshots from a high school student?
As I said, it's standard police work, yes.
Okay, so just to be clear, you never saw the physical text messages as they were on the phone?
No, I only had the screenshots.
Okay, moving on to what was in the text messages. In the text messages, Avery was disclosing a secret plan to break into Coach Brackman's home, is that correct?
Yes.
And in your experience as a detective, do criminals reveal their plans to close friends or distant acquaintances?
Objection. This question is asking Detective Markowitz to speculate.
Overruled. You can testify about procedures within your field of expertise.
Thank you, Your Honor. In these, And in your experience as a detective, do criminals reveal their plans to close friends or distant acquaintances?
Not really in my experience, no. However, in this case, he was simply asking to get back on the team and must have let that slip out on accident.
Sorry, let me restate the question. And in your experience as a detective, do criminals reveal their plans to close friends or distant acquaintances?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained. Let's go on.
Did your investigation reveal, detective, that Taylor Perkins and Avery Becker were close friends?
I had no knowledge of this. I just saw that Taylor Perkins was texting and calling Avery Becker's phone.
But when Taylor was calling and texting Avery's phone, Avery never answered those calls, did she?
No, the calls were not picked up and the texts were not responded to.
Okay, permission for my co-counsel to present an exhibit, Your Honor.
Granted. Is this exhibit 16 that's already in evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay, Detective Markowitz, since we can see Blair Rollins' house is marked on this map, did you ever consider him a suspect?
I followed where the evidence led me, and that was to mainly Avery Becker, although I did put his house on the diagram.
But you didn't obtain any evidence on Blair Rollins?
No.
Did you even decide to consider to an open investigation for him?
No, that is not my witness statement.
And since you were previously acquainted with the late Mr. Brackman, you must be aware of Blair Rollins and Mr. Brackman's previous situation. Is that correct?
I was crossed by him a few times on investigations, but I never really knew exactly who he was defending or who their family members were.
Okay, moving on. And just to be clear, your argument is that Avery Becker's phone was tracked near Mr. Brackman's home. Is that correct?
Yes, all 3 cell towers line up to indicate that it's clear that Avery Becker's phone was traveling along this path to Mr. Brackman's home.
And you never once considered that someone else could have brought Miss Becker's phone to that area?
As it is Miss Becker's phone, I presume that it was Miss Becker herself, as it is also being picked up close to her residence by cell tower 1227-3.
Okay, and as an expert, you know for a fact that a phone can connect to a cell tower, even if it is far away. Is that correct?
That's correct, but in my experience, it will almost always connect to the cell tower that it's closest to.
Right, but you're telling me there is a possibility that Avery's phone could have technically have connected to Mr. Brackman's cell tower, even if she weren't near it?
I suppose so, yes.
Okay, Your Honor, no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Detective Markowitz, why did you decide to put Blair Rollins' house on the map?
I decided to put that there because I like to follow up on all possible leads. However, I didn't follow up on it any further because it's clear that all evidence points to Avery Becker being the main suspect in this case.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Please call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Kyle Cusack to the stand.
You may proceed. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Good afternoon. My name is Kyle Cusack.
And what is your current profession, Miss Cusack?
I am employed at the Denver Police Department as a crime scene reconstruction investigator.
Let's first talk a bit about your qualifications. What professional experience do you have?
I have 19 years of experience working to invest complex crime scenes.
And could you give the jury a few examples of what complex crime scenes are?
Of course, complex crime scenes can be anything from home invasions or robberies to domestic violence or homicides.
Do you have any certifications?
I do. I'm certified by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for crime scene reconstruction and investigation.
Your Honor, I offer Ms. Cusack as an expert in police crime scene investigation and reconstruction under Rule 702.
Any objection, Ms. Burns?
A brief voir dire, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Ms. Cusack.
Good afternoon.
You are a civilian employee of the Denver Police Department, correct?
I am, yes.
So you are not an actual police officer.
No, I'm a crime scene reconstruction investigator.
Okay, and you're not a detective either, correct?
No.
And you've only spent 3 years with the Denver Department, is this correct?
That is correct, but I do have 19 years of experience working to investigate complex crime scenes.
Would you consider this a relatively new time to be working at this particular job?
I suppose so. However, I have far more experience than at this particular job.
Now you state you have experience, but Ms. Kuzak, do you have any formal education in the areas of your expertise?
I don't list any in my statement.
Okay, at this time, Your Honor, I object to this witness being entered in as an expert in crime scene reconstruction due to their lack of formal education, but I do understand that for the purposes of mock trial, they will be regarded as an expert.
Your objection is overruled, and Ms. Kuzak will be considered an expert in this court in the field of crime scene reconstruction.
Yeah, police crime scene investigation and reconstruction.
All right, in those fields. Thank you so much.
Ms. Kuzak, why are you here today?
I'm here today to give my expert opinion on the conclusion of this case because I investigated and reconstructed the crime scene of Mr. Brackman's death.
And what is your overall conclusion for this case?
My conclusion is that an intruder entered Mr. Brackman's residence through the back door, which ended up in them entering a struggle with Mr. Brackman that culminated in Mr. Brackman's death.
And could you walk the jury through exactly what happened leading up to that?
Of course. To start, the intruder arrived on Mr. Brackman's property. We know this because of the Ring security footage taken by Mr. Brackman's video doorbell.
And is there anything notable about this footage specifically?
Yes, it reveals what the intruder was wearing at the time of the break-in.
And how did this help your reconstruction?
It revealed that the intruder was wearing full body coverage, including a mask and gloves. The gloves in particular were notable because they reveal why only fingerprints of the victim were found at the crime scene.
Now, speaking of the victim, where was he at this time?
The victim was at this time in his house, and at this point he was alerted to the intruder's presence.
And how was he alerted to the intruder?
He got a notification on his cell phone, which was associated with his Ring video doorbell.
And what did Mr. Brackman do after he got this notification?
He went to arm himself against the intruder.
And what did he arm himself with?
He chose a Chicago cutlery chef's knife out of his knife block.
Now, in your expert opinion, in your expert opinion, what did the intruder do next?
In my expert opinion, based on the Ring security footage taken by Mr. Brackman's security cameras, the intruder went around the side of the house and ended up entering the residence through the back door.
And how do you know that the intruder did this?
The cameras placed on Mr. Brackman's house were originally obtained by Detective Markowitz that I later used in my review.
And would you recognize that security footage from the cameras if I were to show it to you?
I would, yes.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that my co-counsel is showing Ms. Kuzak what has been previously marked as Exhibit 12.
So noted.
Ms. Kuzak, would you please identify what Exhibit 12 is?
Exhibit 12 is a video taken by Mr. Brackman's Ring security camera facing the back door of his house that reveals the intruder entering the residence.
And are these kinds of records used regularly in cases like this?
Yes, they are.
Is this a complete and accurate copy of Exhibit 12?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, the prosecution offers Exhibit 12 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Thank you. Exhibit 12 will be admitted.
May I constructively publish Exhibit 12 to the jury?
It's already there, yes.
Permission for co-counsel to play the video for the court?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Kuzak, how did this footage assist your reconstruction of the crime scene?
This footage revealed two key details. First, it revealed that the intruder did not hold a knife in their hand at the time of entry, and second, it revealed the noise that the back door of Mr. Brackman's house made as it opened and closed as the intruder entered.
And what's so important about the noise that the back door made?
This reveals that even in the possibility that Mr. Brackman did not receive the ring security notification, he still could not have been surprised by the intruder's entrance, for he would have heard the door open.
Now, what happened after the intruder entered Mr. Brackman's house?
Upon entry, the intruder was confronted by Mr. Brackman holding his Chicago cutlery chef's knife.
And then what happened?
In my expert opinion, a struggle broke out between the two of them.
And what evidence brought you to that conclusion?
My investigation revealed scuff marks on the floor by the back door, as well as a broken plate by the kitchen table.
And did this broken plate reveal anything else for your investigation?
Yes, it did. The broken plate was approximately 5 feet from the back door where the scuff marks were located. So this reveals that the struggle moved from the back door to the kitchen table.
In your expert opinion, what happened when the struggle moved to the table?
In my expert opinion, at this time, the intruder stole the knife from Mr. Brackman.
And how did, what happened next?
My review of the autopsy report reveals that at this time, the Mr. Brackman got the intruder in a sort of bear hug-like hold, pinning his upper arms to his sides.
And in your expert opinion, how did the intruder react to being pinned like that?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Sustained.
Ms. Kuzak, what would you say happened? What did your investigation indicate happened after the intruder was pinned?
My investigation revealed that around this time, the intruder reached up to stab Mr. Brackman in the upper back. The autopsy report reveals the exact location of this wound.
And where in Mr. Brackman's house were Mr. Brackman and the intruder located when this happened?
Unfortunately, we cannot know for sure, as a stabbing of this nature would not leave any major physical evidence until the knife was removed. However, there was a small trail of blood droplets that started near the kitchen table and went to the front door.
Is there evidence of that blood trail here in court today?
Apparently not. Apparently at some point during the investigation, this file was corrupted.
How did this affect your ability to review the evidence?
It didn't. The file corruption took place at some point after my review.
So, Ms. Kuzak, what would have happened once the knife was removed from Mr. Brackman's back?
In my expert opinion, the intruder exited the house through the front door, as we can see in the ring security footage.
And what would have happened when the knife was removed from Mr. Brackman's back?
Once Mr. Brackman was by the front door and pulled the knife out of his own back, he would have bled out quite at an accelerated rate and died almost instantly.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions at this time.
Thank you. We don't do recross, correct?
Your Honor, may I perform a cross-examination?
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Ms. Kuzak.
Good afternoon.
So I would like to talk a little bit about your theory of how the murder occurred. So you came to the conclusion that during the afternoon of March 6, 2020, the victim of the murder was alerted to the presence of the perpetrator by the ring footage, and the perpetrator entered the residence through the back sliding door?
Yes, that was my conclusion.
And you then conclude that the victim took the large chef's knives from the knife block after searching in the knife drawer?
Yes.
And then you conclude that the victim confronted the intruder and they struggled over the knife, correct?
Correct.
Finally, you conclude that the struggle moved to the kitchen, the intruder took hold of the knife.
Objection, Your Honor. Compound question.
Sustained.
All All right, I'd like to move on and examine this theory that I'm talking about a little bit, starting with the ring footage. So, Ms. Kuzak, you reviewed all 4 ring videos collected as evidence, correct?
I did, yes.
And you came to the conclusion that the victim must have been alerted to the perpetrator's presence by this ring footage?
Yes, the ring security system comes with a phone app feature that would have notified him.
As I have been informed of, the alerts from this ring security footage, like most apps on a phone, can be turned off. Is that correct?
They can, perhaps, yes.
Now, did you check the victim's phone to see if the alerts were off for him?
I did not know.
So then it is still unclear whether or not the victim was actually alerted to the perpetrator's presence.
It is likely that they were alerted. However, I suppose it's not totally clear.
Okay, and now I'd like to talk about the knife a little bit. So you state that one knife appeared to be missing from a knife block on the counter.
Yes,
And you believe that the alleged murder weapon was taken from this knife block?
I do.
So it is possible for the knife to have been brought onto the scene.
We see in the ring security footage that the intruder was not carrying a knife, so it is not likely that it was.
But it is true that the alleged murder weapon did not actually match the rest of the knives in the knife block.
It's not uncommon for people to replace chef's knives after they've gone dull or broken, but no, it wasn't part of the matching set.
Okay, great. Now I'd like to talk about the struggle. So you state there being scuff marks on the kitchen floor near the back door. Is this right?
Yes.
And you state that these scuff marks are evidence of a struggle between the victim and the perpetrator.
The scuff marks, along with the broken plate, do indicate a struggle, yes.
Is it possible for these scuff marks to have been created from maybe some prior experiences in the house?
It's possible, yes, but however, their combination with the broken plate do indicate that a struggle occurred.
Do you have any definitive way of telling whether or not they were created from prior experiences in the house?
That is not in my statement.
Okay, now I'd like to talk a little bit about the evidence that you don't actually have. So, is it true that there were photographs taken at the crime scene that displayed small drops of blood between the kitchen and the front door?
Yes, there was.
And there are also photographs of blood cast off on the wall and ceiling near the front door?
Yes, there was.
Is it true that these photographs were partially corrupted and irretrievably lost after you reviewed them?
Yes, at some point after my review, they were corrupted.
So we have no actual physical evidence of these blood droplets and cast off?
Unfortunately not.
And no fingerprints or DNA were recovered from the gate or the back door of the house, correct?
As we could see, the intruder was wearing gloves at the time of the break-in, so no.
Okay, but is this true for the rest of the surfaces that the perpetrator came into contact with?
Due to the nature of their wearing gloves, no, there were no fingerprints from the intruder recovered.
Although they were wearing gloves, did you happen to find maybe any partial shoe prints, maybe outside the house?
No, we did not.
So there is no actual physical evidence or DNA that links the defendant to the crime?
No, there is not.
And the only thing that places the defendant at the scene of the crime is the general height and build of the character?
From my investigation, yes. However, other investigations were done to further confirm the defendant's identity.
Okay, now Ms. Kuzak, I'd like to talk about a theory that possibly makes more sense. So could the evidence that you gathered show that the victim was not alerted to the perpetrator's presence, was therefore surprised and stabbed from behind with a knife brought on the scene?
I do not think so, for they could not have been surprised due to the noise the back door made opening, even if they didn't receive the ring notifications.
So you're telling me that we're supposed to agree with the idea that a high school—
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Sustained.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect.
A brief redirect, Your Honor. Ms. Kuzak, Ms. Barnes just asked you a lot of questions regarding if Mr. Brackman could have been surprised by the intruder. Why don't you think that Mr. Brackman was surprised by the intruder?
First of all, the most likely case is that he received the ring notification. However, even in the case that that didn't happen, we could hear in Exhibit 12 that the back door opened and closed as the intruder entered the scene. Therefore, I do not think he could have been surprised.
And why are you so certain that this must have alerted him?
I'm so certain because the kitchen table is only 5 feet from the back door, so it is highly unlikely that he wouldn't have heard that even if the ring security system hadn't alerted him.
Thank you. No further questions.
Please call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the prosecution calls Alex Cifuentes to the stand.
You ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Alex Fuentes.
Why are you here today, Mr. Cifuentes?
I was a junior at CHS when my mock trial coach, Mackenzie Brackman, died.
I'd like to talk about mock trial. What is mock trial?
Mock trial is an amazing club. We work for most of the year on these examinations, and then we present them at these big mock court case tournaments. I love it so much.
And what does mock trial have to do with today's case?
Mr. Brackman was my mock trial coach, and Avery and I are on the mock trial team.
Were there any other people of note on your mock trial team?
Taylor Perkins was also on my mock trial team.
I'd like to move on to talk about the defendant, Miss Becker. Can you identify Miss Becker in court here today?
I can, yes. She's wearing a white short, she has light brown hair, and she's sitting in a purple room.
How do you know Miss Becker?
Avery and I have been friends for a while. I saw her all the time before she got kicked off the mock trial team.
Why was she kicked off the mock trial team?
Avery and Mr. Brackman had been at odds for a while.
Why had they been at odds?
Avery was always coming late to practices, never prepared for examinations. She would always just wing it at tournaments. Eventually got so bad, Mr. Brackman demoted her to the B team.
What happened next?
Taylor Perkins quit mock trial and Avery was bumped back up to the A team. Then Avery.
Sorry, continue.
No, you can go.
Why were the two less hostile after this?
No, they were not. Avery still came late to practices, still didn't prepare for examinations. Mr. Brackman still told her off for it. Then Avery got kicked off. Then Avery defaced Mr. Brackman's car and got kicked off the team.
Did you have any interactions with Miss Becker after she was kicked off the team?
I did. I talked to her the afternoon before the murder.
Let's talk about that afternoon. What happened the afternoon before Mr. Brackman's death?
After Avery tried to come to a mock trial practice and was denied entry, I met her and Taylor Perkins down at this fast food place called the Fry Shack. All the mock trial team members used to go there. We had this whole long conversation about moving on. That's probably when Avery assumes I stole her phone.
Why would she assume you stole her phone?
I don't know. I learned that she thinks I stole her phone and gave it to some kid named Blair Rollins.
The objection is sustained. Speculation.
Okay, Your Honor, I will move on. Was this the only interaction you had with Miss Becker after she was kicked off the team?
No, she texted me after she was kicked off the team.
Let's talk about those texts. Your Honor, permission for a co-counsel to present an exhibit to the court.
Good.
Mr. Cifuentes, do you recognize Exhibit 14?
I do, yes.
What is Exhibit 14?
Exhibit 14, this is a text conversation between me and Avery.
Is this a complete and accurate copy of this text conversation?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to enter Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. I object to this being admitted into evidence under hearsay for Rule 802.
Your Honor, this is not hearsay under Rule 801D2. This is a statement of the party opponent.
That is correct. The objection is overruled.
Mr. Cifuentes, if you would direct your attention to the second page of this exhibit.
Mhm.
Did Miss Becker say anything of note to you in this conversation?
Yes, she did. She asked me if I could ask Mr. Brackman to let her back on the mock trial team.
And what did you do?
I asked Mr. Brackman, like she had asked me, but Mr. Brackman wasn't having any of it. So I told her that he wouldn't let her back on.
How did she react to this?
She was very angry.
What did she say?
She said if he was upset about his car, he would be really upset about what she did to his house.
What did she say he was going to do to it? She was going to do to his house?
She said she was going to break in and trash the place.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Cifuentes. You felt that Avery's lack of preparation left the team with a lot of anxiety, right?
I did, yes.
Even though she was good at making things up on the fly and improvising?
She was, yes.
And you even asked Mr. Brackman why he put up with Avery, correct?
Yeah, they were always having fights, so I wondered.
And this was on multiple different occasions that you asked that?
Was, yes.
And you also felt that Avery always played the victim and refused to work hard, right?
Yes.
But you did work very hard to prepare for mock trial?
I love mock trial, so I did as much as I could to get prepared for my mock trial tournaments and practices.
So it irked you that Avery was able to succeed by just winging it?
Sometimes it did, yes.
So you felt that it was rightful when Mr. Brackman demoted Avery to B team?
Yes.
And you felt that way despite that after being put back on the A team, she not only won best closing argument, but also best attorney?
Could you repeat the question?
You felt that way despite that after being put back on the A team, she not only won best closing argument, but also best attorney?
I'm confused as what you're asking me. I felt which way?
Rightful that she was demoted to the B team?
I've already said that. Yes, I did feel that way.
Right. And when Avery was kicked off the team, you felt that the team was better off?
She caused a lot of anxiety for us. So in a way, I thought the team was better off without her.
And you were also excited to finally have a larger role?
Again, I love mock trials. So any larger roles I can get, any bigger incorporations to the team, I will always be excited for that.
Okay. Moving on, you told the detective about the text messages from Avery, right?
I did, yes.
But you forgot your phone, so you didn't show them to the cops?
I did not show the direct text to the cops, no.
So you offered to come back with the phone?
I did, yes.
But they said that it was okay if you just sent screenshots in instead?
Yes, they did.
And so you sent in screenshots, right?
Yes.
But you don't have the phone with the text on it anymore?
My phone was super old. It was not functional in everyday life, so I had to sell it and get a new one.
So it would be impossible to see the actual text messages, right?
I guess hard, yes.
And an investigator from the defense also came to see you?
They did, yes.
But you told them that you didn't want to answer their questions?
I did. They were obviously asking questions so as to get me to say things that were false. So I didn't answer any of their questions.
And you wouldn't speak to the defense investigators, even though you're willing to speak to the prosecution investigators?
I did not. Well, the prosecution investigators, just a policeman asking me about the texts. The defense investigator was obviously trying to get me to say that I had faked the text. So I answered the policeman's questions.
And you also believe that Avery killed Mr. Brackman, right?
I do, yes.
But you weren't there?
Obviously, I was not, no.
So you didn't actually witness it happen?
No, nobody did. That's why we're here.
All right, no further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Cifuentes, Ms. Marquis asked you several questions about your old phone on cross. I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about that. Why did you forget your phone at the interview?
My phone was super old and therefore the battery was super old. I always had to plug the stupid thing in, and I plugged it in before the interview and I got called and I was just very flustered and I completely forgot it and left it behind.
And why didn't you answer any of the defense investigators' questions?
Well, the defense was obviously asking fairly biased questions and trying to get me to admit stuff that was just not true.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Next witness. Does the prosecution rest?
Yes, Your Honor, the prosecution rests.
All right. Any motions?
No, Your Honor. Pursuant to mock trial rules, except for evidentiary motions and motions regarding emergencies, there were no motions permitted in mock trial.
Good. Would the defense please call their first witness?
Yes, can I call Taylor Perkins up to the stand?
I'm going to remind you, Ms. Perkins, you're under oath.
Ms. Perkins, please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hi, my name is Taylor Perkins, Perkins.
What high school did you go to, Ms. Perkins?
I went to Colorado High School, but we called it CHS, and I'm a freshman at CU Boulder now.
Why are you here today?
I'm here because I know the victim and the defendant in this trial.
How do you know these people?
The victim was my old mock trial coach, and the defendant is my best friend.
Now let's talk about Avery Becker. What was it like working on a team with Avery Becker?
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. We got to hang out all the time doing something that we both really enjoyed doing.
Did you always get along and work together well?
Yes, we always got along so well. She was literally the Virgo to my Gemini, basically my sister, and we always got along, but not everybody on the team loved her.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, people were outwardly upset with the fact that she wasn't always prepared and that she would make things up on the fly, even though she was really good at that.
How do you know this?
Well, they talked about it a lot and people were outwardly upset with her.
What did you observe about the relationship between Avery Becker and Mr. Brackman?
Well, everybody could obviously see that they didn't really love each other. Mr. Brackman did not love the fact that Avery wasn't always prepared, and Avery didn't love the fact that Mr. Brackman never really gave her much credit.
Would you consider Coach Brackman a good coach?
I mean, he was good. He got us some places, but I think he could have been better.
Would you consider Avery Becker a good teammate?
Definitely. Avery was the best on the team, probably the best lawyer that we ever had.
Did Avery Becker and Mr. Brackman ever get into arguments?
Yes, I definitely think that they got into arguments, but they weren't that bad. There was only one incident with a Sharpie in his Porsche.
Did Avery ever show anger towards Mr. Brackman?
Yes, I think she definitely got angry, but he was her superior or whatever, so she couldn't really do a lot.
Were any of Avery's actions surprising to you?
No, I think anybody in her position would have done the same.
Did Avery tell you, her best friend, that she meant to write on Mr. Brackman's car with Sharpie?
No, she wouldn't do that, and I know her, so...
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Sustained.
Okay, moving on. How did you think Avery handled the fallout of the Sharpie incident?
I think that she handled it pretty well, and like most people would.
Okay, let's talk about the day before the murder. What were you doing the day before the murder?
The day before the murder, I was at the Fresh Shack in the mall with Avery.
Were you with anyone else did you see anybody else at the Fresh Shack, sorry?
We saw the whole mock trial team and they talked to us, like Alex Cifuentes.
Who is Alex Cifuentes?
Alex Cifuentes is Avery's rival on the team. He definitely was outwardly upset with the fact that she wasn't prepared, and he was kind of a suck up to Mr. Brackman.
Did you get along with Alex Cifuentes?
We never really had any issues, but I could tell that Avery and him had issues because they talked about it a lot.
Did you talk to Alex when you saw him at the Fry Shack?
Yes, he sat down next to us and talked to us for a really long time.
What was your interaction like with each other?
It was a little bit strange because he was acting definitely different than usual, and he was acting very remorseful to the fact that Avery was kicked off the team for the Sharpie incident.
What did Avery do?
Avery got kind of frustrated and she kind of stormed off to the bathroom and left her phone sitting on the table.
Was Alex still there when Avery left her phone sitting at the table?
Yes, Alex was still sitting next to me, rambling on and on about how sorry he was.
When was the next time you saw Avery's phone?
I never saw her phone again.
Okay, so let's talk about the day of the murder when Mr. Brackman was tragically killed. What were you doing the day of the murder?
We were looking for Avery's phone. Me and Avery were looking for her phone all day long.
Where did you guys look?
We looked at the Fry Shack. We looked in every single store in the mall that we'd been to the day before.
Did you see anybody else at the Fry Shack when you went there?
Yes, we saw the rest of the mock trial team, and it was a little bit odd because it was when mock trial was supposed to be, and that's where we found out that Mr. Brackman never made it to practice.
Did you ever find Avery Becker's phone?
No, we never found it.
With everything that has been said, do you think Avery Becker killed Coach Brackman?
No, she couldn't have. We were together all day, and she's not like that. I know her really well, and I would know.
Your Honor, no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Miss Parkins. I'd like to start by going over your personal history with the defendant. Now, you know the defendant quite well, don't you?
Yeah, we're best friends. We hang out all the time.
And in fact, you only did mock trial because the defendant did it.
Yeah, I wanted to spend more time hanging out with my friends, but it seemed like something fun, and it was fun to do with my best friend.
And now, regarding mock trial, oftentimes the defendant did not come prepared to practice. Isn't that true?
Yes, but she was really, really good at making things up on the fly, and that was one of her best strong suits.
Is that a yes, Miss Parkins?
Yes, like I said.
Now, on direct examination, you testified that the arguments between Miss Parkins and, not Miss Parkins, the defendant and Mr. Brackman weren't that bad. But you'd agree with me that when you were on the team, Mr. Brackman always seemed to be giving the defendant a hard time about something. Isn't that true?
Yes, Mr. Brackman always was kind of pushing Avery to do the right thing, but that doesn't make them bad arguments.
Of course not, but Miss Parkins, you'd also agree with me that that this little feud between the defendant and Mr. Brackman bothered the defendant. Isn't that right?
Well, I mean, anybody would be bothered if somebody put in such hard work and then didn't get anything in return.
And it bothered the defendant enough that she'd play pranks on Mr. Brackman.
Yes, but usually they are all in good humor.
Now, Miss Parkins, I'd like to speak a bit about your actions around the day of the murder. You claim that on March 6th, you were looking for the defendant's phone. Isn't that true?
Yes, we looked all day, and despite looking through every single store at the mall, we never found it.
And this is the phone that the defendant supposedly lost the day before, correct?
Yes.
Now, the defendant's phone was never out of her reach. Isn't that true?
Usually, but she was really frustrated the day before.
And Miss Parkins, you'd agree with me that the defendant's phone was never out of her reach, correct?
Objection asked and answered.
Please answer the question.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Of course. You'd agree with me that the defendant's phone is never out of her reach, correct?
Like I said, usually that's the case, but in this certain situation, she was really frustrated and upset.
Yet, when the defendant's phone went missing, she didn't realize that until the next day. Isn't that true?
Well, Alex was definitely bothering her a lot, and she didn't really want to be in contact with anybody else, so she decided she just wasn't on her phone. And I don't think that was so bad that she didn't realize it.
Is that a yes, Miss Parkins?
Could you repeat the question, please?
When the defendant's phone went missing, she didn't realize that until the next day. Isn't that true?
Yes, because she was really frustrated with Alex.
And you'd agree with me that the defendant had an Apple phone, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And you could have used Find My Phone to locate it. Isn't that true?
What day are you talking about?
March 6th, when it was supposedly lost, Miss Parkins.
Yes, we never really thought about that because we were also really trying to look for it because it was a really big deal that she lost it because it was literally what she held all the time, like you said.
And it was a huge deal, yet you didn't remember that you could have used your phone to use Find My iPhone to find her phone. Isn't that correct?
I wasn't really paying attention. We were mostly just blindly looking through the mall and the Fry Shack, like I said.
And that's why you just ended up texting and calling her phone. Isn't that true?
Yes, because it would make a little ding, and I think that's a lot louder.
All right. Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Anything further?
Yes, may I have a redirect, Your Honor?
Yes.
Miss Perkins, what was the reason you didn't use Find My iPhone to find Avery's phone?
We were both really flustered that day, and we were really worried about her phone, so we just didn't even think about it.
Okay, Your Honor, no further questions.
Thank you. Is there any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Professor Blake Van Owen to the stand.
Thank you.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, my name is Professor Blake Van Owen, Vanowen.
What do you currently do for a living?
Currently, I'm a private investigator and a professor at CU Denver.
How did you become a professor?
Well, I got my master's in criminal justice from Asher University, and that opened up a door for me to start teaching some classes at CU Denver in social justice and police practices, and I've been teaching there for about 5 years.
What did you do prior to becoming a professor?
I served at the Aurora Police Department.
And what areas do you consider yourself to be an expert in?
I consider myself in all policing matters.
What makes you an expert in these areas?
Well, I've been certified as an expert in many areas, including general police investigation tactics, police practices, forensic evidence techniques, crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, and many more.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, I move to admit Professor Blake Van Owen as an expert in police practices, forensic evidence techniques, crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, and general police investigation tactics.
Any objection?
A brief voir dire, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Professor Van Owen. You used to be a police officer, correct?
Yes, that is true.
You left the force after just 9 months?
Yes, I did.
And you have not worked as a police officer since?
No, I have decided to pursue other lines of work.
You've testified as an expert in cell phone data analysis as well as crime scene reconstruction, correct?
Yes, that is true.
However, respectively, only 5 and 8 times, correct?
Again, for those fields, it is a lot of times, and I use it almost every day in my job, and I've been using those fields of expertise for years.
Is that a yes?
Yes, that is true.
You have no formal training in either of these subjects?
Although I do not, again, I use it every day in my job, and I've been using it for years.
So that is a yes.
Yes, that is true.
You also have no formal education in either of these subjects?
Although I do not, again, I've been certified as an expert in those areas multiple times.
And if you could please answer my question with a yes or no, that is a yes?
Yes, that is true.
Thank you. And besides these testimonies you have already testified to, you have no other experience, correct?
No, again, I have many years.
Thank you. That'll be enough. Your Honor, at this time, I do not object to Professor Van Owen being entered as an expert in general police investigation tactics, but I do object to her having a specialization in cell phone data analysis as well as crime scene reconstruction. Professor Van Owen does not have the required skill, knowledge, experience, training, or education required under Rule 702 to be entered as such.
Response.
Professor Blake Van Owen has been accepted as a defense expert in these areas in the U.S. District Court for the districts of Colorado, Kansas, and Arizona, and in the state courts of Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and New Mexico, and has therefore used these tactics many times. And 5 and 8 times is a considerable amount of time to be using these tactics. Generally, a case spans a long time, and so you have to use these the skill many times. And so I do think that pursuant to Rule 702, Professor Blake Van Owen has had the required skill and experience being in these courts many times to be qualified as an expert in these areas.
The objections are overruled. The witness will testify as an expert in all areas promoted by presenting counsel.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor. Professor Van Owen, what evidence have you reviewed from this case?
I've reviewed the police reports as well as the crime scene reconstruction conducted by Kyle Kuzak and the evidence and call detail records prepared by Detective Markowitz. And I have also done my own partial investigation on parts of the case that I believe were severely neglected.
And what are your thoughts regarding the investigation tactics of Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak?
Well, I've been involved in more than one case with Detective Markowitz, and so I understand how he conducts his investigations. And based on that fact and the fact that there was so much evidence that was overlooked, I came to the conclusion that Markowitz planted the idea in Kuzak's head that Avery Becker was their only possible suspect, and so they made a conclusion before even starting their investigation.
Your Honor, permission to share my screen and show this witness Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 8?
Granted.
Now, Professor Van Owen, without going into detail, can you briefly explain to me what we are looking at here?
Yes, Exhibit 6 is the murder weapon, and Exhibit 8 is the knife block found in Mr. Brackman's residence.
And is this a true and accurate representation of the knife block?
Yes, I used it throughout my investigation and relied on it during my conclusion.
And is this a true and accurate representation of the knife?
Yes, I also used this piece of evidence throughout my investigation and relied on it to form my conclusion.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 6 and 8 will be admitted into evidence.
May co-counsel publish these exhibits to the jury, Your Honor?
Yes.
Now, before moving on, Professor Van Owen, can you briefly explain to me the differences between these two photos?
Yes, as seen, the murder weapon is a different style of knife than shown in the knives in the knife block.
And based on your investigation and these pictures, where do you believe the murder weapon to have come from?
I believe that the intruder brought the murder weapon in with them, and this is because the murder weapon is a different style of knife than shown in the knife block.
And what is the theory made by Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak regarding the manner of the stabbing?
Well, the prosecution investigators believe that the victim was facing the perpetrator as he was being stabbed.
What build would the perpetrator have to be in order to stab this way?
In order to get the power and angle to do so, the perpetrator would have to be significantly bigger than the victim.
And how do the ring videos depict the intruder?
The ring videos show that the perpetrator is about the size of the victim.
What conclusion can you draw from this?
My conclusion was that the perpetrator stabbed the victim while standing behind him. This is because if the perpetrator was able to bring a knife in with them, they would have the ability to surprise the victim, hence being able to stab them. And since the perpetrator is about the size of the victim, they would need to have to stab them from behind in order to get that power and angle to do so.
Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the ring videos. So what do the ring videos suggest in how the victim was alerted to the perpetrator's presence?
Well, the prosecution investigators believe that the ring notifications alerted the victim of the perpetrator's presence.
And what is the problem with this conclusion?
The problem is that these notifications can either be turned off or silenced or simply ignored, like you or I ignore a notification every day. And this would give the opportunity for the perpetrator to be able to surprise the victim.
Great. Now I'd like to talk about the cell tower records a little bit. How were the cell tower records used in Markowitz's investigation?
Well, Margaret reaches the conclusion that Avery Becker was near Breckman's house at the time of the murder solely based on the fact that Becker's phone connected to the tower nearest Brackman's residence, and this is another very large jump to conclusion made by the prosecution.
Why do you say that this was a big jump to conclusion?
Well, in an urban area, a cell tower can cover up to a 6-mile radius.
And as well as this, can a phone connect to a tower that it is not currently next to?
Yes, in fact, a cell phone connects to a tower based on which has the best reception, not which has the closest proximity.
So do we know for sure that Becker's phone was located exactly at Brackman's residence?
No, we do not. These cell towers are not exact. They are not GPSs, along with the fact that my investigation shows that the phone could have been within a 38-mile radius of Brackman's residence and still connected to the tower closest to that residence.
Now, before we move on, how did the cell tower records, what do the cell tower records show about the location of Avery Becker and Taylor Perkins on the day of the murder?
Well, the cell towers show that Taylor Perkins' phone connected to the cell tower nearest the mall, where Avery Becker and Taylor Perkins both said they were there the night of the murder trying to find Avery Becker's phone, which she had lost the day before. And this is supported by the fact that all of the incoming calls and texts into Avery Becker's phone were from Taylor Perkins. And so both of these facts show that even if Avery Becker's phone was near Brackman's house at the time of the murder, there is a very real possibility that Avery Becker wasn't even remotely close to her phone at the time of the murder.
Your Honor, permission to share my screen and show the witness what has been previously marked as Exhibit 22.
Granted.
Now, without going into detail, Professor Van Owen, can you briefly explain to me what we are looking at here?
Yes, this is an audio recording of Jonathan Rollins' court proceeding.
And who is Jonathan Rollins?
Jonathan Rollins was a client of Mr. Brackman's as well as the father of Blair Rollins.
Now, is this a true and accurate representation of this audio recording?
Yes, I used this piece of evidence throughout my investigation and relied on it during my conclusion.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 22 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, I object under hearsay.
Any exceptions?
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 801c2, the definition of hearsay is a statement that a party offers in evidence to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Therefore, this is not hearsay because it is not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
What are you offering it for?
Offering it for the effect on the listener.
Which listener?
Blair Rollins, as this is the audio recording of Jonathan Rollins from his court proceeding.
Mr. Bloom, any further response?
I stand by my previous objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Okay, now before we move on, I'd like to play this exhibit.
I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do.
Now, based on this audio recording, I'd like to talk about the part of your report that mentions another suspect. Who is this suspect?
The suspect is Blair Rollins, a recent graduate of Colorado High School and the child of Jonathan Rollins.
And why is Blair Rollins a suspect?
Blair Rollins has a very strong motive to kill Mr. Brackman.
What is this motive?
This motive is helping her father get revenge on Mr.
Objection,
Brackman.
Your Honor. This is speculation.
Sustained.
Your Honor, if I may respond to that.
All right.
This witness is an expert, therefore they are able to speculate on matters such as this, and they reviewed the testimonies of the other experts as well as investigated Blair Rollins in their investigation. And so I think this is allowed to be speculation because this expert is using this and has the ability to speculate on matters such as another suspect.
I, I'll permit the questioning, but please limit your witness to discussing facts and not mental states, which she could not know.
Okay, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Moving on, Professor Van Owen. Beyond this motive that we talked about, is there any other reason that Blair Rollins may be a suspect?
Yes, she matches the general build shown in the ring camera footage, as well as she was missing the day of the murder from school, and she was connected to Alex Fuentes, who is the student who gave possibly doctored screenshots of her texts with Avery Becker to the police.
Did the police ever investigate Rollins?
Although they did investigate her a little bit, they did not investigate her to the fullest extent that they should have and never seriously considered her as a suspect.
Your Honor, permission to share my screen and show what has been previously admitted and marked as Exhibit 16.
Granted.
Now, Professor Van Owen, can you explain to me what you see in this exhibit?
Yes, this is the map showing the cell towers that cover between Avery Becker's house, Blair Rollins' house, and Mackenzie Brackman's house.
And what does this show about Blair Rollins?
As you can see, Blair Rollins' house is extremely close to Avery Becker's house and covers the same cell tower as Avery Becker's house.
Finally, Professor Blake Van Owen, what is your overall conclusion regarding this investigation?
I believe that this investigation was incredibly rushed. The prosecution investigators made a conclusion before even starting their investigation, which led them to ignore crucial evidence that may have proved their conclusion wrong. They tried to fit the wrong puzzle piece into the puzzle without looking at any other pieces.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Counsel for the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Professor Van Owen. I'd like to start by talking about your client, Ms. Becker. You stated on direct that cell phone data and GPS data are not the same, correct?
Yes, that is true.
However, it is cell phone data that you use to back up the claim that Ms. Perkins and Ms. Becker were at the mall on the day of the murder, correct?
That just shows that their alibi was correct.
Besides this non-accurate data, there is no other evidence besides their words, correct?
And the mock trial students at the fast food joint that they were at that night.
But those mock trial students have not come forward and said that they did see them there, have they?
Yeah, that is true.
Now I'd like to move on to your theory of the murder. You believe that Mr. Brackman was stabbed in the back while he was sitting at the kitchen table, correct?
Yes, that is true.
For this to have happened, the intruder would have had to hold the knife at an angle that most people would not hold a knife, correct?
Which angle would that be?
With the blade facing up, correct?
Yes, as shown in the murder weapon, it would be more comfortable for the intruder to hold the knife that way because of the finger grips on the knife.
However, this is still an unusual way to hold a knife, correct?
Not if you're planning on murdering someone.
Is that a yes or a no?
It depends on the situation in which you are using the knife.
Could you please give me a yes or no answer, Professor?
In this situation, I don't think it would be an unusual situation to hold the knife.
So it's your testimony in court here today that this would be a way that most people would hold this knife?
Depends on the situation, but in a normal situation, yes, it would be an unusual way to hold a knife.
Thank you. Now, permission from my co-counsel to present Exhibit 12, which has already been entered into evidence.
Granted.
Co-counsel, could you please play the video? Professor Van Owen, you testified on direct that you believed the intruder brought the knife to the scene, correct?
Yes, that is true.
Now, in that video, did you see a knife on the intruder?
Although I didn't, there is a possibility that he could have been, or they could have been hiding it behind their jacket.
But that is a yes, you did not see any knife on the intruder in that video.
No, I did not.
Now, you also heard on direct Ms. Kuzak testify that the kitchen table was 5 feet away from the back door, correct?
Yes, that is true.
You also heard in the video played with Kuzak, I do not believe there was sound when it was just played now, but you heard the back door close, correct?
In the video shown earlier, yes, I did.
Now, it's your testimony that Mr. Brackman would have not heard this sitting 5 feet away.
We don't know the quality of Mr. Brackman's hearing, so I don't think it's fair for me to say anything to whether he heard that or not.
Is that a yes?
I don't know his amount of hearing that he had.
Okay. You also believe he was not alerted in any other way?
No, I do not.
No ring door notifications?
Again, those can be silenced or turned off or ignored.
None of the intruders walking around his door or his house?
I'm assuming that if they wanted to intrude into his house, they would want to be quiet, so no.
And not the intruder opening the door and walking across the room?
Again, they want to be silent. They want to be intruding, so no.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Anything further?
A brief redirect, Your Honor.
Granted.
Professor Van Owen, can you go over again why you believe that it is possible for the victim to have been surprised by the perpetrator?
Yes. So if the perpetrator was able to bring a knife in with them, then that would give them the opportunity to sneak up on the victim. And also, since the ring video notifications could have been turned off, there is a chance that the victim could have not been alerted of the perpetrator's presence in any way, shape, or form. And obviously, this perpetrator would want to be as silent as possible when entering the victim's home, since they were not allowed to be there. And so all of those factors add up to the very real possibility that the victim was surprised of the perpetrator's presence.
Further questions, Your Honor?
Any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to call Avery Becker.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What's your first and last name?
My name is Avery Becker. Becker is spelled Becker.
And where do you go to school?
I recently graduated from Colorado High School.
And what's your relationship to today's trial?
I'm being wrongfully accused of the murder of my old mock trial coach, Mr. Brackman.
And how long were you on his mock trial team?
I was on the team for all 4 years of high school.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in mock trial?
Yeah, mock trial always came really easy to me. It was kind of like second nature. So I didn't have to put in as much effort as the other kids did. However, my coach, Mr. Brackman, did not like this.
And what were some of your accomplishments in mock trial?
The past year at regionals, I actually won the Best Attorney Award.
Did Mr. Brackman give you any credit for that?
No, he didn't.
And speaking of Mr. Brackman, what was your relationship to him like?
It was very rocky. Mr. Brackman and I fought a lot. He didn't like the way I worked.
And why did you feel that he didn't like the way you worked?
Well, on occasion, he had called me lazy, and he had told me before that he didn't like it.
Did you feel that you needed to put in as much effort as your teammates?
No, like I said, it came really easy to me. It was like second nature.
And did you and Mr. Brackman ever have any disputes over your work ethic?
Yes, one time he felt that I was late and unprepared to practice, so he demoted me from our A team to our B team.
Objection, that's his hearsay.
Response?
I do not believe this is hearsay because it's not anything he said. It was something that he did that she observed.
Counsel? Any
I
further?
believe this is an out-of-court interaction that they are bringing in.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Moving on. Did you ever try and get back onto the A team?
Yes, I did. My best friend Taylor ended up quitting the team because she knew how much mock trial meant to me and she didn't really care about it as much as I did. So she quit the team so that I could get back on.
And after you got back on the team, how did you perform at regionals?
I did really good. That's actually when I won my Best Attorney Award.
And was Mr. Brackman proud of your success at regionals?
No, he
and,
wasn't.
And how did that make you feel?
It really hurt. And I know that it doesn't seem like I was a hard worker, which I'll admit I wasn't always prepared, but mock trial really did mean a lot to me. And I did put what I thought was my best foot forward. So it really hurt.
So what did you do about it?
Well, I'm very ashamed of what I did next, but I took what I thought was a dry erase marker and I wrote on his Porsche Worst Attorney Award.
Did you know that it was a permanent marker?
No, of course not. I was trying to make a point, not deface his car.
And would you have even done it had you known the marker was permanent?
No, of course not.
And did you get in any trouble from writing on the car?
Yes, I got kicked off the team for good.
And how did you feel after getting kicked off the team?
It really hurt. Like I've said, mock was my entire life, so getting kicked off the team was really hard for me.
And did you talk to anyone about how that made you feel?
Yeah, the night that I got kicked off the team, I talked to my mom because I was really upset about it. And she calmed me down and just told me that I should apologize to Mr. Brackman in the morning.
So did you take her advice and apologize?
Yes, I went to his office the next morning and I tried to apologize, but he refused to talk to me. So I ended up sending him a text saying that I was sorry, but he never responded.
And where were you the day that he was killed?
I was looking for my phone at the mall, more specifically the Fry Shack.
And were you with anyone?
Yes, I was with my best friend, Taylor Perkins.
And did you guys ever end up finding your phone?
No, we did not. I still haven't found it.
Do you have any suspicions about what might have happened to it?
Yes, I believe it was stolen.
And speculation.
Response?
She's just seeing what she preserved and what she thought happened based on her perception.
Let me ask a question. How can she perceive with her senses that the cell phone was stolen?
I can rephrase the question.
Okay.
Did you ever end up finding the phone?
No.
Did anything happen to the phone that would make you think that it was stolen?
Yes, Alex Cifuentes claims that I sent them texts.
Hearsay.
Are you offering this testimony for something other than the truth of the matter?
Yes, I'm offering it just to show their relationship to Alex Cifuentes.
I'll permit it.
All right.
Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'll start over. I believe my phone was stolen because Alex Cifuentes claims that I sent them texts asking for help to get back on the team. However, I would never do that. Alex and I are not friends at all.
And did you know where Mr. Brackman's house was?
No, no idea.
And were you upset to hear about his death?
Of course. I mean, while we had our differences and we fought a lot, I would never wish death on anyone. And he was my mock trial coach, who I know pretty well.
And finally, did you kill Mr. Brackman?
No, of course not. Like I said, I would never wish death on anyone.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I request a brief time check?
Of course.
You have
Timekeeper?
exactly 9 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Becker. I'm going to begin by asking you a few questions about your relationship with Mackenzie Brackman. Mr. Brackman was your mock trial coach,
Yes,
but as you testified, you and him never really got along, correct?
this is true.
This is because he believed that you were lazy?
Yes.
Because while he wanted you to put more time into the preparation of your materials, you have an ability to come up with things on the fly.
Yes, I do.
This led to you and Mr. Brackman arguing at every single mock trial practice?
Yeah, I would say almost everyone.
And along with this title of mock trial coach, Mr. Brackman is also a defense attorney, right?
Yes.
However, it is your opinion that Mr. Brackman wouldn't know a good cross-examination if it hit him over the head?
Yes, I have said that before, and I do believe that.
Now let's talk about the vandalism of Mr. Brackman's Porsche. Before the regional mock trial tournament, you were bumped down from the A team to the B team, right?
Yes.
And at regionals, you did end up winning Best Attorney Award and Best Closer?
Yes, I did.
After your friend Taylor Perkins stepped down from the A team and offered you up his spot, correct?
Yeah.
And despite you winning these awards, Mr. Brackman still felt that you should have put more time in and followed the scripts?
He did feel that way, yes.
This made you very angry.
Yeah, it really hurt to have my work ethic be questioned and put down.
Right. It hurt you so much that you even called Mr. Brackman the worst coach in the state.
Yes, I was really hurt by his words.
You were so hurt by his words that you grabbed a permanent marker and vandalized Mr. Brackman's vintage Porsche with the words Worst Attorney Award?
Yes, unfortunately, I did.
Let's talk about the aftermath of that vandalism incident. When Mr. Brackman saw what you had done to his car, he kicked you off the mock trial team, didn't he?
He did.
This made you even angrier?
Yeah, mock trial was my life, so it was really hard for it to all just be over like that.
So you decided to go home and tell your mother that you had gotten kicked off the team for no good reason?
Well, I didn't want my mom to be mad at me, so yeah, I did lie to her.
So you didn't tell your mom what had happened to Mr. Brackman's car, did you?
No.
You told your mother that Mr. Brackman had simply gotten out of practice, gotten angry at you out of nowhere, and kicked you off the team, right?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't want my mom to be mad at me.
You told your mom that you would get back at Mr. Brackman if it was the last thing you did, didn't you?
Yes, I did, because I was really upset.
I would now like to talk about the afternoon of March 6th. You never attended school this day?
No.
You were only with your friend Taylor Perkins this entire day, correct?
Yes.
So to your knowledge, no one else can account for your whereabouts on this day other than Miss Perkins?
To my knowledge, no one else can account for my whereabouts. This is true.
I would now like to talk about the text with Alex Fuentes. You're aware that Alex Fuentes claims you texted him?
Yes, I am aware of that fact.
You're aware that within these texts, he claims you asked for help to get back on the mock trial team after you were kicked off.
Objection, hearsay.
You opened the door, overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. You also are aware that, I'll ask the question again. You're aware that within these texts, Alex claims that you asked for help to get back on the mock trial team, correct?
Yes.
You're also aware that within these texts, Alex claims that you divulged your plan to trash Mr. Brackman's home.
Yes.
Finally, you say that the person pictured in the Ring security camera footage matches your own height and build?
They do match my body and build.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Anything further, counsel?
A brief recross, Your Honor. Did you send the text messages and the screenshots from Alex Fuentes?
No, I did not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anything further from the defense?
The defense rests.
All right, let's prepare for closing argument. Counsel for the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor. I would just like to renew my request to reserve any remaining time for rebuttal.
I was going to say that you have made that record.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And Ms. Getzoff, you'll be doing the closing for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ah, perfect. I'm going to stop my video and let you two be the stars. So please proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, today you heard the story of someone who pushed the limit again and again until finally she went too far. That someone is the defendant Avery Becker, an entitled student who would lash out in ways that even her close friends described as rash when she didn't get what she wanted. On Friday, March 6th, after her mock trial coach, Mackenzie Brackman, kicked her off the mock trial team, the defendant did not know when to stop. Enraged and with her pride tarnished, the defendant vowed to get back at Mr. Brackman if it was the last thing she did. But this time, it wasn't just petty vandalism. It was a burglary that ended in murder. On Friday, March 6th, the defendant broke into Mr. Brackman's home and stabbed him to death. Today, the defendant is being charged with burglary in the second degree and murder in the first degree. Pursuant to Colorado Criminal Jury Instructions number 7 and 8, in order for the defendant to be found guilty, the prosecution must have proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant unlawfully entered the home of Mr. Brackman with intent to vandalize and stabbed him in the back with a kitchen knife, leaving him to bleed out on the floor. The evidence you heard today leaves absolutely no doubt. The defendant went too far. It all started when Miss Becker couldn't control herself at mock trial practices. Recall that while Mr. Brackman was a caring coach who just wanted to help the defendant improve, Miss Becker would ruthlessly berate her coach at every single mock trial practice, and even admitted to telling Coach Brackman that he wouldn't know a good cross-examination if it hit him over the head, despite Mr. Brackman's countless years as a defense attorney himself. You then heard about when Mr. Brackman's exasperation with trying to help the defendant came to a head following months of disrespectful behavior, leading to the defendant being rightfully demoted to the B team. In a fuming display of hostility, the defendant grabbed a Sharpie and went outside to go vandalize Mr. Brackman's vintage white Porsche 911 Carrera, but not before petulantly screaming in Mr. Brackman's face and calling him the worst coach in the state. When Mr. Brackman saw what the defendant had done to his car, he did something the defendant was lucky hadn't happened months prior. He kicked the defendant off the mock trial team. Desperate to get back on the team, the defendant then texted Alex Fuentes and divulged her plan to trash Mr. Brackman's home and break into the place. But the defendant didn't just break in and vandalize. The defendant went to Mr. Brackman's home, found him inside, initiated a violent struggle, and ultimately stabbed Mr. Brackman in the back, leading him to bleed out on the floor. The defense spent their time crafting an alternative theory that someone other than Avery Becker stabbed Mr. Brackman. But let's review the evidence. You learned about the call detail records that placed the defendant's phone at the scene of the crime precisely when the murder occurred. You learned about the phone being tracked along Rock Creek Parkway, which would be the most logical route for one to travel from from Miss Becker's home to Mr. Brackman's home. You also learned about the Ring security camera footage, in which an individual who even the defendant herself admits has the same height and build as her own is seen unlawfully entering Mr. Brackman's home that Friday afternoon. You also learned about the physical evidence at the crime scene, in which Kyle Kuzak told you exactly how it happened, from the moment Miss Becker entered through the back door to when she wrestled the knife out of Mr. Brackman's hands and plunged it into his back. The prosecution has proved that on March 6th of 2020, the defendant Avery Becker unlawfully entered Mr. Brackman's home and stabbed him to death with a kitchen knife. The defendant was not able to stop herself, but you members of the jury can stop her and hold her accountable for the murder of Mackenzie Brackman. With that, there is no choice but to find the defendant guilty of burglary in the second degree and murder in the first degree. Thank you.
Counsel for the defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Who is the culprit here today? It most certainly must not be a once high school student who is upset with her mock trial coach. Avery was one suspect, but due to the poor investigation on behalf of the prosecution, no other suspects were brought to light. In today's trial, not once did the prosecution mention the name of Blair Rollins, a girl with a motive, ability, and no alibi. A poor investigation was done, and now a murder runs free. Today, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you had any doubts of Avery, a high school student, being the murderer in today's trial, then you cannot wrongfully convict her. Reasonable doubt ensures that if you have any doubts, even one, it would be wrong to accuse an innocent girl of a murder like this one. Today, from the prosecution, we hear from Alex Cifuentes and Detective Markowitz, which after listening to their statements and answers, you are probably sitting in confusion. Detective Markowitz testified today that he had never even verified Alex Cifuentes' screenshots of the texts and claimed that Alex had left his phone at home due to him being too nervous. These statements clearly show how botched Detective Markowitz left this case, and it shows the true lack of care this case had. How could we have only heard from one student, and that student had all the information we needed? Why weren't more students that were connected to Mr. Brackman put into question? As we still don't know the answer to this, we do know that a huge puzzle piece is missing from their testimonies, as we still don't know if the true evidence that sets Ms. Becker as a prime suspect is even real. The screenshots that were exchanged between Ms. Becker and Alex Cifuentes haven't even been seen by a detective or anyone else working on this case besides Alex Cifuentes himself. Today, we hear from many witnesses who prove Ms. Becker's innocence. First, we hear from Taylor Perkins, who is Avery Becker's best friend on the mock trial team and who was with Avery during Mr. Brackman's killing. She described how they spent all day on the hunt for Avery's missing phone. And as a close friend of Avery's, Taylor recounted how Avery and Mr. Brackman had their differences, but Avery would have never resorted to violence, as Avery had already felt terrible about the Sharpie incident. Then we hear from Professor Blake Van Owens, who is an expert police that practices forensic evidence, crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, and general police investigation tactics, who analyzed this investigation done by the prosecution team today and showed how poorly it had truly been done. The investigation left holes in this case due to the lack of care and due to the case being extremely rushed, which leaves room to miss important things. These holes left Avery as prime suspect, but had they paid closer attention, Avery wouldn't have even been on their radar. Finally, we hear from Avery Becker herself, and as she described her relationship with Mr. Brackman, we can realize that their relationship wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. One issue was the writing on Mr. Brackman's car, which resulted in Avery being kicked off the mock trial team. While Avery admits that she thought it was a dry erase marker she was writing with, she still tried and failed to apologize to Mr. Brackman in person because he had already been killed. While they didn't get along great at times, she testified that she would never resort to violence against him. And when Avery was asked today if she was responsible for Mr. Brackman's death, she replied under oath that she would never even think to do such a thing. After reviewing everyone's statements and questions, it is easy to conclude that after today, the prosecution has tried to pin a murder on a once high school girl. With everything we have heard today, it is clear that the prosecution is stretching to get facts to close this case as fast as they can, and in doing so, they wrongly accused Avery Becker guilty. The evidence shown today was like a puzzle the prosecution rushed to try and complete, but in doing so, they put all the pieces in the wrong place. They missed steps, and now, like I said, my murderer runs free. Today, the prosecution had the burden of proof, the burden which they failed to meet. They had to prove beyond any reasonable doubt whatsoever that Avery Becker was the only possible guilty suspect. They failed to meet this burden, further proving Avery Becker's innocence. With the requirements of reasonable doubt in place, members of the jury, we ask you today to follow the truth and find Avery Becker innocent.
Thank you, counsel.
May I request a time check for rebuttal, please?
Yes, ma'am.
You have 56 seconds.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Getzoff just tried to tell you that today's case is about puzzle pieces that don't fit together. And that is exactly right. But it's not the puzzle pieces on the prosecution's part that don't fit together. It's on the defense's, because in order for them to force their puzzle pieces together, they want you to ignore all of the hard evidence. They want you to ignore the call detail records that place the defendant's phone at the scene of the crime. They want you to ignore the texts with Alex Cifuentes. They want you to ignore the Ring security camera footage that shows an individual with the same height and build as the defendant unlawfully entering Mr. Brackman's home. But the digital evidence doesn't lie. Today, ladies and gentlemen, you must find the defendant, Avery Becker, guilty of burglary in the second degree and murder in the first degree. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. And thanks to all of you for such a wonderful presentation. As you continue your journey through these competitions, you're going to find out that these arguments, some evil genius designed this problem so that every time that you feel like you have a good footing on a position, you'll find that it always can be turned against you. So always start looking for the other side of the pancake, because that's one of the miracles of moot court, is it really expands how you think through a problem. And I hope that this was a valuable learning experience for all of you today. Just remember, the more mistakes that you make, the better it is, because mistakes make you really think and learn and grow, and you remember your mistakes more than you remember your glory. So never let a mistake stop you, because being able to represent people and help them solve their problems is what we do. And it's an honor to be able to do it. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of heartache, and it's a big journey, but you're on your way. You've got a great start. And maybe someday you'll be making us proud, like our two Colorado Congress people, Jonah Goose and Diana Gett, who are lawyers from Colorado. One went to CU, one went to DU, who are arguing in the impeachment trial. Maybe one of you will have to do that someday, and hopefully not, but welcome to the profession. Do my scoring judges have any comments?
So, it's always a privilege to be able to judge you guys, and you did a really great job, very poised, and you know, I think you were well prepared and very poised, especially like the closing arguments, really bringing it all together, and I thought you guys did a great job.
Brooke, did you feel how she took that argument and made it sound different than it's ever sounded before in her closing? As I was watching your face, I could see you were really coming to realization about what the reality of these facts are. They can be changed, and it always sounds different every time it plays. Mark, do you have any comments for the group?
Sure. I thought everyone did a wonderful, fantastic job. You'd all make great advocates and lawyers. And for those of you who are witnesses, I noticed how much effort you put into being a witness with your facial expressions and your responses and your tones. And I thought it was all wonderful. You should all be very proud of what you've done and all the time and effort you've put in. And I wish everybody could win.
See, Elizabeth, are you here?
Yes, Your Honor, I'm here.
Oh, I was thinking of Elizabeth.
Yes, I'm sorry. My apologies.
That's okay. There are a lot of Elizabeths. I'm not saying that she's. Maybe I'm not sure what's happening. Did anybody have a burning question that would affect the group in a massive way with enlightenment? Because I'm sure you've had enough critique for a while, but sometimes somebody has something that they learned, or they learned about something that humbled them, that can really help everybody. Does anybody have an insight that they gained? Jasper, I'm going to pick on you. I watched you in your examinations, and I watched how you were encountering a witness today that was very difficult. Tell me what you learned about that experience. What was that encounter to you?
Well, I suppose, like you said, even though I thought I had a really good grasp on all the facts, just unexpected how they can turn it around on you.
Yeah, you're at that level where that's going to happen, and then you have to figure out how to move forward. And you did a good job on the fly, Jasper. Let me see. Any other comments from, I think everybody did a really good job, and watch yourselves on YouTube because you'll be really proud of what you've done. So scoring judges, if you want to go ahead and tally up your scores and get them into the Central District of Colorado Bar Association mock trial so that these kids can learn what they've achieved and go home and get a really good night's sleep for the first time in 5 days. Let's do that. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to serve as your judge today, and good luck. I hope to see you in court.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your
Thank
Honor.
you, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.